Mai, an 18-year-old girl, gently bowed as she carried a tray of food. Her delicate hands were speckled with red marks from the icy dishwater. After placing a bowl of noodle soup on the customer's table, she wiped the sweat off her forehead. Her eyes held a trace of exhaustion, yet they remained gentle, as if she had long grown accustomed to this hard life. Unlike other girls her age, Mai rarely smiled. Her life was a quiet and lonely journey. She had lost her parents at a young age, and her grandmother, the only family she had left, had also passed away, leaving Mai to face the vast world alone. The old suitcase she had brought with her when she left her hometown for the city still sat silently in the corner, containing both her memories and her modest dreams. This small eatery was the only place that gave Mai a sense of peace, but she had no idea that on this very afternoon, her life was about to take a completely different turn. The restaurant door swung open and a small bell chimed crisply in the quiet space. A man stepped inside. He was tall, his silver hair neatly combed, and his black suit was impeccably tailored down to the smallest detail. His refined appearance stood in stark contrast to the humble surroundings of the eatery. The entire restaurant fell silent, all eyes fixed on the dignified presence of the man. Mai was no exception. Her steps faltered in the middle of the aisle, and her gaze unconsciously met the deep, piercing eyes of the stranger. A strange feeling crept into her heart, as if he could see right through her soul. His eyes were neither cold nor friendly, just unreadable. The atmosphere grew heavy. Mr. Fong walked in with slow, deliberate steps, the sound of his leather shoes echoing clearly on the tiled floor. He chose a table near the window, sat down, removed his gloves, placed them on the table, and looked directly at Mai. His voice was deep and warm, yet carried an undeniable authority. "Could you come here for a moment?" Mai took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She stepped forward, gripping her order pad tightly. Her voice was soft, tinged with a hint of hesitation. "Yes, sir. What would you like to order?" Mr. Fong gave a slight smile, though his eyes remained focused on her, as if memorizing every detail of her face. "What's your name?" The question caught Mai off guard. Customers here usually just place their orders. No one ever cared about her name. A flicker of nervousness crossed her face before she quietly answered. "My name is Mai." He nodded slowly, as if deep in thought. "I'll have a bowl of pho and a hot tea. Just call me Mr. Fong." Mai quickly wrote down his order and turned away, trying to avoid his gaze. Yet no matter how much she tried to ignore it, she couldn't deny that every word he spoke, every movement he made, left her with an indescribable feeling. One that was both cold and strangely familiar. Throughout the afternoon, Mai constantly felt his eyes following her every step. Each time she glanced back at his table, he would lift his head and look at her. His gaze seemed to hold something unspoken, yet he remained silent. When he finished his meal and left, he left behind an amount of money 3 times the cost of his order. Mai wanted to run after him to return it, but by the time she stepped forward, his figure had already disappeared beyond the door. In the days that followed, Mr. Fong continued to return to the restaurant. Every time, he chose the same seat by the window, where the light streaming through the glass highlighted his quiet, contemplative demeanor. And each time, he would ask about Mai Vai, but only in brief, polite questions, never prying too deeply into her life. Gradually, Mai found herself wondering, why would a man of his stature frequent such a humble eatery? And why did his eyes always seem to search for her as if he were looking for something? That question lingered in Mai's mind, but she had no idea that this encounter was the doorway to a world filled with secrets and dangers beyond anything she had ever imagined. In the days that followed, Mr. Fong began visiting the restaurant frequently, almost every day, at the same late afternoon hour. He always chose the seat by the window, where the golden evening light streamed through the glass, casting a quiet, enigmatic aura around him. Each time, he ordered simple meals, grilled pork with rice, but he always left behind an amount double or even triple the actual cost. Mai tried to refuse, attempting to return the extra money, but he would only smile, his voice gentle yet commanding. "Just accept it. I admire your dedication and politeness. That's worth far more." His words left Mai feeling unsettled. She had never received such special attention from anyone before. Over time, Mr. Fong's presence became something familiar to her. Yet she couldn't ignore the strange, unshakable feeling that arose each time he appeared. After a few weeks, he began talking to her more. He shared stories about his life, how he had built his career from nothing, becoming a successful businessman. Although he had built his success from nothing and possessed everything a man could want, Mr. Fong admitted that his life lacked one thing, a complete family. In his eyes, Mai recognized a deep loneliness, one that felt strangely familiar, as if mirroring the emptiness in her own heart. One evening, after the restaurant had emptied, he looked looked at Mai, his gaze more serious than ever. Mai, do you want to escape this difficult life? I have a large house. You could live there. I want to take you in as family and take care of you. Your life would change completely. Mai froze. She didn't know how to respond. His offer was sudden, almost overwhelming, and something about it made her hesitate. She couldn't understand why a wealthy man like him would want to help her, but his eyes, the same deep, commanding gaze she had always seen, now held only raw, undeniable loneliness. She spent many nights lying awake, wondering if this was her chance to leave behind the struggles of her current life. But deep down, what truly swayed her was not the promise of a better future, but the inexplicable sense of connection she felt with this man. After much thought, Mai nodded in agreement. As the car carried Mai up the hill toward Mr. Fong's estate, she was awestruck by the scenery surrounding it. The mansion was nestled deep within a dense canopy of trees, completely isolated from any residential areas. It stood grand and imposing, with gleaming marble walls and massive windows that reflected the golden hues of the setting sun. Stepping through the main entrance, Mai was overwhelmed by the opulence inside. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting dazzling light across the vast space. Exquisite antique furniture was meticulously arranged, exuding an air of elegance and refinement. Yet, despite the lavish furnishings, the house felt devoid of warmth. There was an eerie coldness in the air, something unspoken lurking within the endless corridors and shadowed corners. A chill crept down my spine, but she remained silent. Mr. Fong led her through the house, his deep voice resonating in the hushed stillness. Mai, there are a few rules you must follow. First, you are never to go upstairs, especially not to the room at the end of the hallway. Second, you must never ask about my past. And lastly, each night before bed, you must lock your door from the inside. Never leave your room before 6 a.m. Mr. Fong's words sent a shiver down my spine. Why is that? She dared to ask. He stopped in his tracks, slowly turning to face her. His gaze, once gentle, now carried an icy sharpness. Just remember what I told you. Don't be too curious, Mai. She fell silent, not daring to press further. Yet, a heavy feeling settled deep in her chest. She tried to reassure herself. Perhaps she was overthinking. After all, weren't these just simple house rules? But on her first night in the mansion, as she sat by the window, staring into the pitch-black darkness outside, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into a place where she did not belong. A place filled with secrets beyond her imagination. During those first nights, Mai had never felt more lost. Every room in this vast house exuded luxury, yet the cold emptiness made it suffocating. The silence was too absolute, as if it was holding on to the lingering presence of those who had once lived there. Every tiny sound, the wind whistling through the cracks, the rustling leaves outside, felt unnaturally amplified in the unsettling stillness. Even the sound of Mai's own footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. On the third night, the silence was finally broken. At first, it was just a faint noise, like soft, measured footsteps coming from upstairs. Mai tried to dismiss it, convincing herself it was nothing more than her tired mind playing tricks. But then the sound repeated itself, again and again, steady, unwavering, like the ticking of an old clock. Her heartbeat pounded against her ribs. Then suddenly another noise, a faint rattling at the door, as if someone was gently testing the handle. Mai held her breath, straining to listen. No further footsteps followed, but then a whisper, soft, almost imperceptible, like the wind slipping through a crack in the door, yet not quite natural. It wasn't a voice nor a sound she could make sense of, but it sent a freezing chill down her spine. She sat up abruptly, gripping her blanket tightly as if it were the only thing protecting her from the darkness surrounding her. In the dim glow of her bedside lamp, the shadows of tree branches outside cast trembling shapes on the walls, like ghostly hands reaching for her. The entire room felt as if it were being swallowed by an unseen force. Mai wanted to run, to push open the door and find Mr. Fong, to demand answers, but her legs refused to move. The warning he had given her before, do not leave your room before 6 a.m., echoed relentlessly in her mind. Like a warning, Mai didn't dare go against his words. She curled up, hugging her legs tightly, listening to every sound outside. By morning, when the sun was high in the sky, the fear from the previous night felt like nothing more than a terrible nightmare. But Mai knew it wasn't a dream. She had heard it, clearly. Undeniably. At the breakfast table, Mr. Fong sat quietly, sipping his tea, his eyes lost in thought. Mai took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Is there someone living on the second floor? I heard footsteps. And the door? Mr. Fong's hand froze midair. The teacup tilted slightly in his grasp before he set it down with deliberate care. His gaze locked onto Mai. Not the usual gentle look, but something colder, heavier. A sharp, piercing stare that made her feel as if she had made a grave mistake. That is none of your concern. His voice was deep and measured, yet it carried undeniable authority. Just follow what I've told you. Mai lowered her head, not daring to press further, but inside her a storm of curiosity and unease raged, stronger than ever. In the days that followed, she tried to focus on her chores, cleaning, helping around the house, yet her mind remained fixated on the second floor and the sounds of that night. The coldness in Mr. Fong's eyes and the strange rules of this house made it impossible for Mai to stop questioning. One afternoon, while cleaning his study, she unexpectedly discovered a drawer that was no longer locked. She hesitated. Her eyes flickered toward the door, as if afraid someone might walk in at any moment. After a brief internal struggle, she reached out and pulled the drawer open. Inside was an old photograph. In the picture, a beautiful woman stood in the middle of a garden filled with white flowers. A faint, sorrowful smile lingered on her delicate face. The light reflecting off the image made Mai freeze. She turned it over. A small inscription, written in soft yet hurried handwriting, came into view. "Forever love you." Mai's heart tightened. She didn't know who the woman in the photo was, but something about her presence evoked an indescribable sadness. What did this photograph mean? Why had Mr. Fong hidden it away? Did this woman have anything to do with the secrets he had forbidden her from uncovering? Mai carefully placed the photo back and closed the drawer as if nothing had happened. But the unease it stirred within her refused to fade for the rest of the day. The gentle yet sorrowful gaze of the woman kept appearing in Mai's mind. It was like a reminder that within this house there were hidden stories. Stories that, if uncovered, could change her life forever. Mai knew that this was just the beginning. A few days later, Mr. Fong announced that he would leave the villa one afternoon to meet with a business partner. This news felt like a faint glimmer of hope for Mai. She knew this might be a rare opportunity to uncover the secrets hidden on the second floor, the place Mr. Fong had strictly forbidden her to enter. As soon as Mr. Fong left the house, Mai waited for the housemaids to become busy in the kitchen, then silently entered his study. She knew the key to the forbidden room was usually hidden in the drawer of his desk. Her hands trembled as she pulled the drawer open, and as she had expected, the small silver key was neatly tucked inside. Mai took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The second floor was darker than she had imagined. The faint light from the small window in the hallway wasn't enough to dispel the chill in the air. Every step she took on the wooden floor creaked, making the atmosphere feel even more tense. At the end of the hallway, the door to the forbidden room stood quietly, full of mystery. As Mai inserted the key into the lock, she paused, her heart pounding loudly in her chest. She had asked herself hundreds of times whether she should do this, but the curiosity, the urge to know the truth, was stronger than the fear. With a gentle turn, the door swung open, and a strange scent filled her nose. A blend of sweet jasmine and the musty smell of time forgotten. The room before her was elegantly arranged with classic furnishings. A meticulously carved vanity, a large mirror covered in dust, and a bed with white silk curtains that had yellowed with age. It seemed as though this place had been abandoned for a long time, yet it had been cared for enough not to deteriorate. Mai stepped inside, feeling as though she was trespassing into a world that didn't belong to her. She placed her hand on the vanity, where a dusty old diary lay quietly. The leather cover was worn, the corners of the pages bent, but the handwriting on the pages was still clear. Mai hesitated before opening it, and the first few lines made her choke up. "I feel like I'm no longer free. He controls everything. I'm scared, but I don't know how to leave here." The shaky handwriting, as though written in a moment of panic, kept Mai from tearing her eyes away from each following page. She read the desperate words of a woman talking about isolation, about being imprisoned in this very villa. The time she wanted to run away but failed made Mai stop. Her hands trembled so much that she couldn't turn another page. Her entire body felt cold, as if a chill had swept through her. She had recognized the woman in the old photo, with a gentle face and a sad gaze. Now these diary entries made everything clearer. That woman was none other than Mr. Fong's wife. Mai closed the diary, forcing herself to stay calm. She placed it back in its original spot, but the feeling of fear wouldn't leave her. Why had Mr. Fong hidden his diary? What had happened to that woman? Was she still alive, or had she become part of the secrets the house was hiding? Mai stepped back, intending to leave the room, but when her hand touched the door, a faint sound echoed. She turned around, but saw no one, only the faint light from the window reflected off the large mirror. In that moment, Mai thought she saw the figure of a woman flash by in the mirror, dressed in a white gown and standing still. Her heart seemed to stop. She rushed out of the room, slammed the door shut, and locked it again. Her breath came in short gasps as her hand gripped the key tightly, trying to calm herself. Back in her room, Mai sank to the floor, clutching her chest. She didn't know if what she saw was real or just an illusion, but one thing was certain. This house was hiding secrets she wasn't ready to face. Perhaps the truth is even more terrifying than she had imagined. Mai was holding the diary in her hands, and each line of desperate words from the woman inside seemed to carve themselves into her mind. The fragmented, trembling stories made her feel as if she were standing in front of a door, leading to a horrifying truth. Her hand shook as she stared at the diary, but her ears involuntarily picked up a faint noise from downstairs. The sound of a door opening, followed by footsteps on the wooden floor. Mr. Fong had returned. Mai's heart raced uncontrollably. She quickly closed the diary and placed it back in its original spot on the vanity table. Her hands fumbled as she locked the room door, trying to make as little noise as possible. When the door clicked shut behind her, she hurried back to her room, feeling like her weak legs might give out at any moment. Just as Mai sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to stay calm, another sound rang out. Rapid, forceful knocks on the door, as if the person outside couldn't wait. Mai, open the door. Mr. Fong's voice was cold, each word landing like a knife cutting through the quiet air. Mai sat motionless, her heart seeming to stop, but she knew she couldn't escape. Summoning all her courage, Mai stood up and walked toward the door with trembling hands. When the door opened, Mr. Fong's face appeared, his eyes cold and sharp, as if he were trying to see straight through her. Mai lowered her head, trying to avoid his gaze, but her rapid breathing betrayed her. Mr. Fong stepped into the room, moving slowly yet with an undeniable authority. His eyes scanned every detail in the room as if searching for evidence to support his suspicions. "You went upstairs?" he asked, his voice low and sharp like a knife. Mai tried to stay calm, but her voice trembled. I was just downstairs. Mr. Fong smirked, but the smile was not the kind of gentleness Mai had once seen. It was cold and dangerous. He moved closer, his eyes darkened, as if hiding his anger. "You think I don't know?" he said, his voice lowered but commanding enough to make Mai feel as if her legs were about to give out. "You've been snooping through my things." Mai felt as though her whole body had frozen. She lowered her head, gripping her hands tightly together to stop her voice from shaking. "I just wanted to know who the woman in the picture is." Her question was like a spark, suddenly changing the atmosphere in the room. Mr. Fong's smile vanished completely. His face became cold, his eyes deep and full of menace. He stepped closer, one step at a time, pushing Mai into the corner of the room. "You don't need to know," he said, his voice low and firm. "Just remember that if you try to cross the boundaries I've set, the consequences won't be pleasant." His words were not loud, but they carried the weight of a threat. Mai felt the air grow thick, enveloping her, making it hard to breathe. She lowered her head, too scared to reply, but inside her, a small flame began to ignite. Fong didn't know, but what she had read in the diary had changed everything. Mai knew she couldn't stay here any longer. The secrets of Mr. Fong weren't just about the past. They also posed a danger that was lurking, waiting for her. When Mr. Fong turned and walked out of the room, his shadow slowly disappeared behind the door. Mai collapsed onto the bed, clutching her chest, feeling as though she had just escaped a nightmare. But she knew the real nightmare was far from over. Mai looked out the window, her eyes filled with determination. She had to leave as soon as possible before the truth hidden in this house consumed her forever. Her gaze was fixed on the small, carefully prepared bag. She had packed only the essentials, a few sets of clothes, some cash she had saved up, and the diary she kept hidden like a protective talisman. She knew that if she wanted to escape, she would only have one chance. As the clock struck midnight, the house fell into a deep silence. From her room, Mai could hear the wind howling through the long hallways, the soft creaking of doors like whispers in the night. She tightened the bedsheet that had been tied into a makeshift rope and looked out of the second-floor window. The rough rope was securely tied to the bed frame, and she pulled on it one last time to ensure its strength. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were filled with resolve. She had to leave, no matter what. As her feet finally touched the ground, a fleeting sense of relief washed over her. But that feeling was quickly shattered by the loud barking from the dog kennels. The entire pack of guard dogs awoke simultaneously, their barking echoing through the garden, tearing through the silent night. The lights in the villa flickered on, casting cold white beams across the yard. At the front door, Mr. Fong's figure appeared, tall and imposing, holding a large wooden staff in his hand. His face was so cold that it froze Mai for a moment. "Mai, you think you can escape?" His voice was low but powerful, making the atmosphere feel dense and suffocating. Mai didn't respond. She turned and ran as fast as she could through the dark garden, her heart pounding in her chest as if it might burst. The heavy footsteps of Mr. Fong echoed right behind her, followed by the growing sound of barking dogs getting closer. In the dim light of the garden, Mai tripped over a protruding tree root crashing to the ground. Her palms scraped against the rough soil. She tried to get up, but as soon as she lifted her head, Mr. Fong was standing right in front of her, blocking her way. "Stop right there," he said, his voice full of menace. Mai instinctively stepped back. Her eyes showed both fear and determination as she gripped her small bag tightly, as if it were her last hope. Mr. Fong raised his staff high, eye, the shadow of the large stick casting over Mai's pale face. But before he could strike, a bright beam of light from a flashlight hit his face, causing him to freeze. "Police, step away," a firm voice called out from the direction of the villa's gate. Mai was stunned as she saw a group of police officers quickly entering the property. Their footsteps echoed as they moved, and their flashlights illuminated the entire garden. "Mr. Fong, we have received a report accusing you of property theft and your involvement in your wife's death. You will need to come with us for questioning," one of the officers announced. Mr. Fong stood motionless, his eyes full of fury as he stared directly at Mai. "You called them?" His voice was soft, but filled with hatred. "Do you think they can protect you forever?" A middle-aged police officer approached Mai, gently pulling her to her feet and reassuring her, "You're safe now, don't be afraid, you did the right thing." Mai watched as Mr. Fong was handcuffed and led away, a sense of relief mixed with disbelief. She could hardly believe she had escaped this nightmare, but when Mr. Fong cast one last cold, vengeful glance at her, she knew the battle was far from over. After Mr. Fong was arrested, the police took Mai to the station for questioning. As she sat in the back of the police car, her mind spun with flashbacks of the horrifying night. The barking dogs, Mr. Fong raising his staff, and the look of hatred in his eyes as he was handcuffed. At the station, Mai shakily handed over the journal and the photograph she had found in the forbidden room. As the journal was opened, the investigators read each line carefully. Their expressions darkened as they read on. One of them, an older officer with a calm demeanor, sat down across from Mai and asked in a gentle but serious tone, "Mai, do you know anything about your biological family? About your parents or other relatives?" The unexpected question made Mai freeze. She shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know anything. I've been an orphan since I was little and lived with my grandmother. She never talked much about our family." The officer nodded and exchanged a few words with his colleagues. After searching through old records related to Mr. Fong and his late wife, they uncovered a shocking truth. The officer turned back to Mai, his gaze filled with sympathy but also gravity. "According to these documents, you're not just an ordinary orphan. You were the biological niece of Mr. Fong's late wife. Your mother was her younger sister, but she was lost in a family tragedy when you were very young." The room seemed to freeze. Mai widened her eyes, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. She stammered, I'm her niece, the woman in the photo?" The officer nodded slowly, his voice deliberate. "Here is the rephrased version in professional, easy-to-understand style, translated into American English with proper grammar and preserved meaning." "Yes, it's true," the officer confirmed. "She was your biological aunt. Mr. Fong knew this, but deliberately concealed your identity in order to seize all the assets that rightfully belonged to her family." Mai felt as if she were being swept away by a tsunami, everything within her collapsing. The image of the woman in the photo, the gentle yet sorrowful gaze, now stirred a pain she could not put into words. "When did he find out?" Mai asked, her voice choking. Her hands were clenched so tightly that they turned white. "We're not sure of the exact timing," the officer replied, "but it seems he discovered your true identity after your grandmother passed away. He took advantage of your lack of information and your difficult circumstances to keep you close, concealing everything." Mai didn't know how to express her emotions. Part of her wanted to cry, overwhelmed by the injustice and the difficult years she had endured, while her true identity had been hidden from her. Another part of her burned with anger as she thought about what Mr. Fong had done, not only to her, but also to his late wife. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but inside the fire of determination was rising. "I will reclaim what's rightfully mine," she said firmly. "Not just for me, but for my family. I won't let anyone take what belongs to us." The officer looked at her with encouraging eyes. "We will support you. This isn't just a case of stolen property. It's also about the life of his late wife. What you've done, providing the journal and cooperating with us, has been a crucial first step in bringing the truth to light." Mai nodded, a strange feeling swelling within her. She no longer felt like a lost, weak girl. Now, she felt her own strength and knew that she would fight to reclaim everything that had been taken from her. Several months later, the trial of Mr. Fong drew significant attention. In the large courtroom, everyone fell silent as irrefutable evidence was presented. The journal of his late wife, a hurried letter she had written before her death, and Mai's truthful testimony, these all laid bare the truth. The man who had once exuded authority now appeared haggard, his eyes sharp with bitterness. He tried to defend himself, but the evidence, along with the testimony of former staff at the mansion, exposed everything. The judge sentenced Mr. Fong to several years in prison for forgery, asset theft, and his involvement in the death of his wife. When the gavel struck decisively, Mai felt as though a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. As she was led out of the courtroom, Mr. Fong turned to look at her, his gaze filled with hatred. His voice, low but chilling, made the air around her feel thick with menace. "You have betrayed me," he said hoarsely, "but I won't let you go so easily. You will pay." Mai stood silently, not saying a word. A cold shiver ran down her spine, but her heart felt more resolute than ever. She knew she had done the right thing and nothing would make her regret it. After the trial, with the help of her lawyer, Mai officially reclaimed all the assets that Mr. Fong had stolen from her grandmother's family. It wasn't just about the property, it was about honor and the right to live with the truth. However, Mai didn't let herself get caught up in the ambitions Mr. Fong had once pursued. She looked at the large sums in her accounts and the valuable assets and knew she wanted to make a difference. She decided to donate most of the money to charity. The cold mansion, once a place of fear, was transformed into a support center for women affected by abuse and orphaned children. The dark rooms were now filled with light and laughter. The women who had once been hurt now had a place of refuge, and the orphaned children found a new family. In a place where one can truly grow, one bright morning, Mai stood in the newly planted garden, a spot that once was overshadowed by darkness. The vibrant flowers bloomed, their scents of jasmine and roses mixing in the breeze. She smiled, feeling a peace in her heart like never before. Mrs. Han, the former housekeeper of Mr. Fong, approached her, her face full of emotion. Gently, she took Mai's hand, her eyes filled with tears, but also pride. "You've done what your mother and even our late mistress could not," Mrs. Han said softly. "Not only have you brought justice, but you've also turned pain into hope. I am so proud of you." Mai grasped her hand, her eyes shining with determination. "I don't want to live in the sorrowful past anymore. I want to live for the future, for better things. You and everyone else have inspired me." Looking up at the clear blue sky, the soft sunlight brushed her face, like a welcoming embrace of freedom and hope. No longer the scared girl lost in grief, Mai had found her strength and knew she could turn past pain into something extraordinary. This was the true peace she had never known before, a meaningful new beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to listen to our story. This journey isn't just about Mai overcoming her challenges, it is also a lesson in courage, resilience, and belief in the goodness of life. Through it, we hope you realize that no matter the storms we face, as long as we hold on to our integrity and determination, the light of hope will always shine through. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more inspiring tales, please support our channel by liking this video to help spread the story to more people. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss future stories. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to keep sharing these stories. Thank you sincerely, and we wish you health and peace always.